Is Israel a democratic state? Because in a recent interview, the ex-Czech ambassador to Tel Aviv stated on a private television channel that Israel is the only democratic and fair state in the Middle East. Could you comment on that? And for whom is it democratic and for whom is it not?
I don't think it is democratic at all. I know the usual stuff that people say, that this is the only democracy in the Middle East. But it is not. I think whenever a state declares itself to be a democracy only for several citizens, but not for others, it cannot be a democracy. It's not. It's like, pregnancies. There's no half pregnancy, so you cannot be half democracy. There are better and worse democracies, but ours is not a democracy at all because of two things. From the inside the 67 borders, there is an officially discriminated population, which is the population of the Arab citizens of Israel. And outside, we're almost 50 years now occupying another people with no rights at all. They don't vote for our parliament, whereas the other at least vote. But they don't vote for the parliament. They cannot decide anything about their freedom, their rights, nothing. And they're under the military rule of Israel. So I really don't understand how people can say that this is a democracy. Well, I actually understand how they can say, because they have interests. And the interests are to appeal to the American appetite, or just to say what is customary to say in the West. But this is just a matter of interests, nothing else.
In March 2013, an independent human rights organization and legal center, Adela, launched the Discriminatory Laws Database, an online resource that collects more than 50 Israeli laws discriminatory against Palestinian citizens in Israel in all areas of life, including their rights to political participation, access to land, education, state budget resources, and criminal procedures. Could you pick a few of these laws and which are the most significant, and could you comment on them?
Yeah, I'm not a legal expert, so my commentary cannot be legal in any way. That is opposed to Adala. They are a legal Center for the Human Rights of the Arab citizens in Israel. But I think the first one is the very definition of Israel as a Jewish state, Jewish democratic or not, but as a Jewish state, which means that people get privileges just for being Jews. This means that they can bring relatives from abroad without much ado. They simply are entitled to bring them along, and every Jew around the world can simply come. Whereas the Palestinian diaspora cannot treat their own relatives like the Jews. So I think this is the most important parameter. Now there are others. The Arabic language is not treated as the Hebrew language, and I understand that now there are planned new laws even to be harsher towards the Arabic language. But even now, Arab students wishing to study in a university in Israel, all the universities are Hebrew universities, and our populations in population in Israel wanted to establish an Arab university, and the wish was denied again and again. And this means that they are discriminated. This is small institutional discrimination, but it works because for all of them, Hebrew is the second language. Even if they are expert in Hebrew, it's the second language for them, whereas for the Jews, it's the first language. They will always be primary. They will always be the more expert, the better students, simply by definition. So these are two things that simply are close to my heart because I'm a university teacher. Right?
Could you specifically explain the significance of the Nakba Bill?
Yes. So the Nakba Bill, which I'm not I'm not sure is going to be accepted in full, but it prohibits the commemoration of the Nakba events in 1948 in whatever way. This means that, and in this respect, it's not only the Palestinian citizens in Israel that are discriminated against, but also me and people like me who wish to commemorate the Nakba. And we actually do this. Every year in May, we make it a point to do something, some occasion in the university, especially in order to go against this Nakba Bill. But the very idea of the Nakba Bill, which prohibits, it's against the freedom of speech, it's against the freedom of beliefs, cultivate your own culture and history and memory. I think it wouldn't be tolerable in any democratic state. So this is another example.
Can Palestinian citizens of Israel buy land or a house in Israel?
No, not exactly. I mean, they do buy houses, but it's much more difficult for them because most of the land belongs to the Jewish agency in one way or another. And then there are simply difficulties, formal difficulties and institutional difficulties, which make it much harder. It's not forbidden by law. I mean, you can be a citizen and buy an apartment, of course, and there are many Palestinian citizens who own apartments of their own. But it just the procedures are much more difficult, which makes it simply rare.
When Avigdor Lieberman was here in Prague last December, he talked about Palestinians from East Jerusalem, that they can freely buy houses in West Jerusalem. Is it true?
No, this is certainly not true. I mean, this is a point that is worth exploring, because the Arab neighborhoods in Eastern Jerusalem, and that was his point in saying this, they were inhabited by Palestinians in 1948 when the Nakba occurred. People owned properties in Western Jerusalem and in Eastern Jerusalem, and there was no division then. And after 1948, when there was a division, the several neighborhoods in Eastern Jerusalem were occupied by Palestinians who were deported from their previous houses in Western Jerusalem. Now, there is a law now that enables Jews who owned property in the East to demand the rights or the property rights in the East, but there is no similar law enabling the Palestinians to come back to the previous houses that they did own in the West, in Western Jerusalem. So it's simply a lie.
If they wanted to buy a new house, not go back to their own house, but a new house in West Jerusalem, would it be possible?
I don't think so. Because this is a legal thing that I don't want to go into, because it's something that legal experts should explore, and that's totally not my expertise. But I don't believe. I mean, it will be again. There's a question of what is formally possible and what is informally possible, and whether it is formally possible, I really don't know. Informally, I don't see this happening.
In your lectures, you speak about Israel as an apartheid state. Could you give most typical examples why you say so?
Well, actually, it comes back to the questions that I answered already, because of the fact that there is an institutional discrimination against two populations in Israel. One, the most discriminated, is the occupied population that is under military law, and unless we get rid of this situation, we still have a responsibility towards this population, and this is a very strong case of apartheid. Then there is the question of the Palestinian citizens of Israel, which are discriminated against, as we just said. We can perhaps explore just the rule of law in the occupied territories. In the occupied territories, people may be neighbors, living very near to each other in a Jewish settlement and in a Palestinian village, let's say. It can be 1 kilometer away from each other, or even in the same neighborhood in East Jerusalem. But if someone is arrested in one of those populations, the treatment is totally different because there are two different legal systems. The Jews get exactly the same legal treatment as I get in Tel Aviv, as a Jew and Arab would get in Tel Aviv as a citizen of Israel, whereas his Palestinian neighbor would get a military law which is much harsher. All the treatment from arrest to pardon is totally different.
Related to what we just talked about, I would like to ask you about several things. Let's start about the one state. And it's related to the fact that you just mentioned that there's an apartheid state where at one place there's two kinds of citizens which are not living under the same conditions, under the same system. So this could be a reason for opening it up and having one state. What are the constraints? What is your opinion on one state solution? And then we can talk about more things related to the elections.
Okay, I think this is the most difficult problem, actually. And I think it is so difficult that I'm not sure it is fruitful to talk about it at the present stage. And I'll explain why. Because I see good points and bad points, both in the two-state solution and in the one-state solution. And, as an optimist who doesn't care about pragmatic factors, maybe I would say, yes, let's go for a one-state solution. But I think we should also take care or look at, at the realistic constraints. And I think the most important constraint is the view of the international community. I don't see any situation, any realistic, in the near future, any realistic scenario in which the Western states would allow the establishment of a one-state, one Israeli-Palestinian state. And if Israel wants to get rid of the occupation and build its own democracy without the Jewish, living aside the Jewish in the Zionist definition, I think this is much more realistic, that this is something we can ask the international community to be involved in. We can ask for support in our case as leftists and Palestinians, of course. So this is something I can see happening somehow. Well, not tomorrow, but this is something I can see happening. Whereas one state, it's a revolutionary situation. And maybe it's more realistic to count on a revolution than on, something pragmatic. Maybe this is more pragmatic, I don't know. But if you think, in reasonable steps without the involvement of, big events and revolutions, then I don't see the one state taking shape. And there's another factor to this. I look at the case of the apartheid state in South Africa. And in South Africa, they got rid of the apartheid, at least formally. And I'm happy for that. I think this is a huge achievement. This is something I do look forward to happening in Israel and Palestine. But still there is a very strong apartheid inside that they didn't get rid of. And this is an economic apartheid, but it's also built on the racial discrimination, very similar to the one that was there before. And I'm quite suspicious when people so willfully say, yes, I'm for a one state. If it's not a socialist state or at least a social welfare state, it will keep a very strong Jewish upper class with some Palestinian businessmen, rich businessmen, and the rest will be, there will be a second layer of Jewish class that is less privileged, and at the bottom, all the Palestinians will be deprived of rights. Okay, they will be able to vote, but that's it. And you know how the democracy, and now it is a democracy in South Africa, but you know how democracies in neoliberal period are built. They don't really give the power to the people. So unless we build it in a very fruitful way, I'm not sure this is something we should look for. Whereas in the two states, maybe it's more realistic perhaps to be achieved.
In the two-state solution, what would happen to the settlers? There are nowadays about 500,000 settlers in the West Bank and in Jerusalem. What would happen to them?
I think they should go. I truly think they should go. I think things like that happened in the past elsewhere, and I think settlements should be evacuated. And actually, when I think of the one state, the fact that people are, happy to accept the settlements is not exactly. I mean, I visit quite often the demonstrations in Bilin, and I see the settlement, just sitting there over the border. They took their land, so why, even if there is a one state, why would they give up their land to those people who just came over? So maybe there may be. I mean, people can think of, be inventive and think of solutions, but on the whole, apart from here and there, exceptions, I think they should be evacuated. Of course, giving them, the opportunities to build their houses and towns anywhere else. There's a lot of space in Israel and Palestine, but I do think they should be evacuated. Anyway, I think. I'll just add to that, especially the case of East Jerusalem, which is so annoying, because you see that now settlers just enter, those that I just mentioned, enter the Palestinian neighborhood just for spite, that they sit in their neighborhood. It's a totally Arab neighborhood, and there are these 3 Jewish Orthodox families who just sit there for spite. I don't respect that. I want them to be out, even if there's a one-state solution.
What should happen to the settlements? There are now many towns. The settlements look like towns. What should happen to them? Should they be destroyed as they were in Gaza?
No, I think the Palestinians should decide what they want to do with them. If they want to bring it back to the original as much as is possible, I suppose not. I mean, they can use them. Why not? I mean, and there are factories there. Things were done. And on the other hand, the landscape was ruined, so they can decide. But I think it's up for the Palestinians. I mean, if these things happen, I think it's up to them. It's certainly not up to the evacuating side, the evacuating party, to decide what happens with the evacuated area.
Talking about two-state solutions, there's always talk about land swapping. What are the constraints? What are the advantages, disadvantages of land swapping? Land swapping, land.
I think, again, these are details that should be worked out when there is, a general map. There is on the table the Arab peace proposal. Let's discuss that. I mean, if Israel the Palestinians have already agreed, but if Israel agrees and it is supported by the international community to work on this as a general draft, then I think, yes, the border can be amended here and there, and I'm sure these are details that I'm sure it is easy to solve.
Could you talk about the Boycott Law of 2011, and what does it mean for you, how it affects you, how it affects other people?
Yeah, it's very significant. I think it's a very important law because, first of all, coming back to the concept of democracy, this is totally an explicit anti-democratic law. It means, I don't know whether people know, so maybe I should say a word about it. The law forbids the support, any support to any kind of calling for sanctions, boycott, or divestment, both in the occupied territories and for Israel in general. And I mean, if this is my view that the solution for the Palestinian problem or for our region will come through divestment and sanctions, what should I do? Not say it? I mean, so this is a very harsh condition against free speech. And this is something that I think any state that respects free speech should be wary about. So this is in general, the idea, the general idea. About myself, I did support the boycott in all sorts of variations. I can say a little bit about it in a second. But I didn't exactly obey all the guidelines given by the Palestinian Boycott Committee because I think that personally things should be considered individually. I mean, some persons can find this sanction or this divestment more worthy of worthy pursuing, whereas others think, well, this is a decree that I don't want to obey to, and these are not laws. These are just recommendations, and I think they should be taken as recommendations. And sometimes, the boycott people, I mean, from Ramallah, they present it as take it or leave it, the whole thing. And I think some of the decrees I don't sympathize with. But in general, I do take, I think both sanctions coming from states, of course, and divestment and boycotting of academic institutions, of economical institutions, buying goods, Israeli goods, or goods from occupied territories. Again, it's a question of a personal preference. All these I think are good ideas, and I think this gives the international grassroots community a place to work from, towards the Palestinian community. So, in general, yes, I did support it, I did say it. Now, after 2011, this is forbidden. Now, the problem is that it is forbidden, and the punishment it's not a criminal law. So, it's not that if I support the boycott, I get sent into prison for a month, for example. Because if it was the case, I would go for a month in prison. I wouldn't go for 20 years, but it's not reasonable. I mean, it's not something that I would get. And yes, this is something you as an activist, you agree to be punished. Okay, that's not terrible. The same thing with the refusal to the draft. And so people take it upon themselves, the risk that they will be sent to prison for a while, and okay, and sometimes they are sent. So this is something I would take upon myself. The present law is not like that. This is a civilian suit that people can say, I am offended by Anat Matar's calling for boycotting my factory, for example, because my factory is Israeli and she calls for boycotting Israeli goods. And I sue her for, let's say, 100,000 shekels. And it can be accepted by, it's reasonable that it will be accepted by court. And this is something, just ruining all your life just in order to support this bit. Strange, and this is a risk that is not worth taking. So what I do is exactly what I'm doing now, is just explaining this situation. If you want to know what I thought until 2011, you can find it in the internet easily. If you want to know what I'm saying now, I present the difficulties with the law, and I don't hesitate to say that I urge people to learn, to get reliable information on both sides, to compare to South Africa, to think what they did or what they would do in the case of the South African apartheid regime. Would they boycott? Would they call for sanctions? Are the situations really, really different? So these are things that I think people should consider individually. This is a responsibility of every citizen in the international community, I mean.
So if we talk about the example of South Africa, boycott, what do you think was efficient and generally about boycotts?
Okay, I read a lot about it. So I know there are various answers, and actually I'm not an expert. This is not a legal thing. It's something I would know, but I read a lot as a supporter of BDS, as just someone interested. I was interested in the South African apartheid even then. So there are people who say that it wasn't the boycott that really brought down the apartheid regime, that it was really marginal, and what played a role was a political situation around South Africa, in other African countries, and something that happened in the States, and all sorts of shifts in the Eastern Bloc, and so all these earthquakes around. This is what brought down the apartheid regime. I can't argue. I don't think how you can argue with historical analysis that are different, but there are other people who say that. Even from within, from the white population in South Africa, who opposed, the bringing down the apartheid, they were afraid. But I think even for them, psychologically, the fact that they were boycotted by the international community gave them a source of shame, in their own state, and I think this kind of shame was important eventually. So even psychologically, if not, historically, causally, this is what caused the fall of the apartheid. So I actually think it was an important factor.
Would this be the same in Israel?
One cannot tell. I think, first of all, and again, I think there is an equivalence with what happened in South Africa before the apartheid fell. The sanctioned community is against the sanctions. I mean, take the case of Iran. The Iranians, for example, do not support America now, and they do not support the sanctions turned against them. This is natural. I mean, and I suppose the same thing would happen if Israel gets more and more sanctions. But I think things work dialectically. I'm a philosopher. This is how I must think. I mean, these contradictions. They don't support it. They object it. They resent it. They're against the sanctions. But on the other hand, some horizon is open for their thoughts, and I think this dialectics may work.
I will ask once again about the state of democracy. What does the Boycott Law say about democratic state of nature of Israel?
It doesn't treat it at all. It has to do only with urging or supporting or calling for the BDS.
Should Palestinian refugees be allowed to go back to Palestine 48, present-day Israel, if they wish so?
Okay, here again there are several cases. First of all, and most important in my eyes, are the internal refugees. The internal refugees, the present absentees, what it's called, are citizens of Israel now. They see their demolished villages just over the corner, and they are not allowed to go back. And these, I think, this is nothing that changes the population, or there's no demographic threat, or nothing. The same people, it's just a question of going back to their villages. So if there is a kibbutz over the land and the villages, I don't think that kibbutz should be demolished and the village be rebuilt. But there are pragmatic options, and in many cases, the ruins of the villages are still there, and I think people must get the permit to go back. I mean, the inside refugees. But you didn't ask about that. It's just a point that is important for me, so I use the opportunity. About the law of return, this is something, again, that should be worked out whenever a solution is proposed. And again, it has to do with the question whether it is one state or two states. In one state, it's a different situation altogether, because, the people who decide, and the question of demography is out of, there's no question, actually. If we still keep the two states, I mean, the 67 border, I still think I'm for the law of return. I think, in general, I don't think that there are millions of Palestinians, that throngs of Palestinians will come to Palestine again. I don't see this happening. But if people are really afraid, I suppose they can put limits to it. They can describe a second generation, third generation, or other descriptions that will somehow close the sort of numerous clauses, but not. I'm not talking like those 2,000 people. It's not a question of 2,000 people. Israel can absorb much more Palestinians than 2,000. Just let's say a small number and get rid of the question. So this is not what I'm saying. I think there is a problem here. I'm for the law of return. And if people are really worried, okay, think of something more pragmatic, but not a very minimal number.
Should Palestinians be able to go back to their original homes?
Well, it depends what happened to their original homes. I don't think that if a family lives there, it should be evacuated. No. I don't think that, if something wrong was done, then, you correct wrong with doing wrong to someone else. But I think, again, that pragmatic solutions are possible. First of all, because there are places, as I said, there are places where the land is there, and they can simply go back to. If not, I think mixed neighborhoods can be built and can be planned. And actually, there are plans. There are concrete plans. This is why we have NGOs working on all this. We have NGOs working and suggesting detailed plans for the Bedouins in the Nakba, for example. And we have another NGO which proposes plans for the day that maybe one day will come with the law of return, and they suggest how to deal with this. So it's just a question of being prepared to accept and to hear and to be sensitive to the wishes of other people.
If Palestinians, the refugees, decide not to return, who should pay the compensations?
Well, it will be the international community anyway. I mean, even if it's Israel, it's the international community, so why hide? I suppose it's part of a general plan, and that we're not there. I'm sorry to say, but we are not there. And the question which bank account is signed for the transfer of money to which, I mean, we simply are not there. The question is how we progress, how we make a progress, how we advance towards this idea, not I think, those details.
What borders should there be for the Palestinian state?
The Palestinian state?
For the future Palestinian state, the independent, if there's two-state solution, so for the independent Palestinian state?
I think the Arab proposal now is quite good. I mean, if we're talking about Gaza and the West Bank, and I think there must be a strong and reliable connection between Gaza and the West Bank, I think that's fine. I mean, it doesn't include Jordan, and it doesn't include other parts in Palestine if we accept this solution, apart from corrections, on the border. That I think it's a quite agreed solution, and actually I know, it's not that I think, I know that many of the voters for the right-wing parties and Haredi Jews and those who not those who voted for Bennett and the Jewish home or something, but Likud voters, some of them don't really care about the settlements, don't really care about what happens beyond the borders of 67. And I think that once a proposal of this kind is discussed seriously in the Israeli parliament, I think it will grow a big support. I think it will be backed by most of the population. There is a strong and important role for the media here, and of course for the opposition. And one of the tragic And tragedies in Israel is that we don't have a strong opposition, in the Zionist parties. But and this is something that I would worry about. But if there was a strong opposition in the Zionist camp, I think this is something they should work on. Just insist on accepting the Arab proposal with these boundaries, and simply show with statistics and polls that most of the population, the Jewish population, supports this.
What would be the status of Jerusalem?
It should be divided. It is divided. It is divided, and the taxi driver who took me to the airport, we just discussed it, and he was a Likud. He is an example for me, actually, for now, because he said this time he didn't vote. He voted for another of the coalition parties, but not Likud. But before that, he voted for Likud. And he said, "I don't care about all these. I don't visit the Arab neighborhoods. I don't understand why those Jews, Orthodox Jews, go into the Arab neighborhoods. Why do they do that?" And this is a Likud member. I mean, once. And so I think it's quite easy. It's quite easy. There can be a solution, an international solution for the holy places, for the old city in Jerusalem, maybe not divided, of course not, not belonging to one of those sides, so sort of neutral zone, and the other neighborhoods. It's quite clear how to divide them. This is, I think, a place where amendments in the borders should be taken care of, because Israel built a lot, and intentionally, on the Palestinian land after 1967. And I'm not sure all of this can be dismantled. Some must be dismantled, but I'm not sure it can be dismantled altogether. So again, these are details to be worked at when the moment comes. But on the whole, Jerusalem should be divided. It wouldn't hurt. It wouldn't hurt, apart from some lunatics. It wouldn't hurt to the majority of the population in Israel, as opposed to what the common view is. But I'm quite sure of this.
Despite all this, the Likud party has still in its program quite considerable annexations of land in the West Bank. What is your comment on this?
They don't want to annex. They're not. This is how they differ from what's called the Jewish home. I mean, they want to annex all the Area C of the Oslo Accord, and Israel doesn't say it. I mean, the official Israel, Netanyahu, doesn't say it. He doesn't want to annex because annexing is being totally responsible, formally responsible for the population in those areas. He doesn't want to take the responsibility. Now he's responsible for them, but he's not formally, but he's not, he's not acknowledged as responsible for them. So the Palestinian Authority is, because these are what's called Area C, the Palestinian Authority is responsible for giving them education and sanitary treatment and all this. But Israel is responsible for enabling this by building roads and giving the planning the land accordingly and giving permits to do also. And Israel doesn't do this. So very systematically, Israel discriminates against the Palestinian population in Area C. In house demolitions, in grabbing land for its own settlements and military camps and all that. But formally, no. I mean, there's no annexation. And this is, again, why it's so hard for people who don't know and who don't study the facts to say, including friends, my academic friends who are not, declare that they are not political. They say, we know the apartheid regime in South Africa. You're not. Israel is not an apartheid state. You see that there is a Palestinian population, it's over there, and it's taken care of by the Palestinian Authority. And so they buy, these lies very nicely put together. Whereas if there was an annexation, it wouldn't work anymore. So he doesn't want to annex them formally. He just wants to treat them as annexed, when this is something else.
Should all Palestinian prisoners be released?
When? Again, if we're talking about the solution, I mean, a peace treaty, yes. Because we have here, I turned for another precedent, and this is the Irish precedent. The political prisoners who agreed to sign the accord with the British government were released eventually. They were released in stages, and we have, again, in Israel and Palestine, we have a shadow proposal just awaiting, on the shelf for the day. People really experts on this, prepared stage by stage which prisoners should be released in every stage, in each stage of the negotiations, and then, when these things happen, then this bunch of prisoners should be, from lighter to the heaviest. And eventually, yes, all of them, because if they are political prisoners, they should be released. And I know it's painful. I know it's not easy. But if they agree to sign, this is what was done in Ireland. Some people didn't agree to sign, and they are still in prison. But if they agree to sign on the accord, this means they acknowledge the settlement, then, yeah, I think this should happen. But again, we're talking about the fantasy and the dream, not about the reality. The reality is that there's no agreement, that there's hardly any negotiation. And now the question is what to do with the Palestinian prisoners. There are 4,500 Palestinians at the moment. And I think there are many things that should be done now. First of all, Israel has to release immediately the veteran prisoners. I mean, prisoners who sit there for over 30 years, and it said it would release them on 29th, just a year ago, 29th of April 2014. There was the fourth step in the negotiations that should have been committed, and Israel declined in the very last moment, and it postponed it to May, and then it postponed it forever, and they said, no fourth step. And the fourth step included those veteran prisoners. So this is the first thing. I mean, tomorrow, today, this should be released. Enough. But about others, there are administrative detainees. The whole idea of administrative detention should be erased. Should simply be illegal, apart from 1 in 10 years. This is what happens in real democracies, and if Israel wants to think of itself as a democracy, again, this is an urgent step, not something awaiting a fantasy of a peace agreement. Simply today, I mean, just stop the idea of administrative detention. You have something to say against me, put me to trial. And then, okay, military trial is something else, and I can say a lot of things against it. But even that, put me to military trial, but put me to trial. Tell me what the evidence is against me. Who was testifying against me behind closed doors and I didn't know? Was it my neighbor who hates me? Was it someone who was paid? I want to know all this. And I cannot defend myself if, behind a veil of ignorance and simply, just don't know when I will be released. Tomorrow, in a year, in 2 years, I don't know. So these things, I think, are urgent, and they don't await a fantasy.
Many of the Czech people think when they think about Palestinian prisoners, they immediately think of all of them as terrorists.
Yes.
Could you throw some light on the number of prisoners who are there for actually killing Israelis? And what about the rest of the prisoners? Who are they?
Okay. Israel is to blame for this, for two reasons. One is that Israel labels all of them security prisoners. And security prisoners for Israel is both someone who planned to to put a bomb, in a bus and killing 50 civilians, and a boy who threw a stone. They're all security prisoners, and all the stages in the middle. I mean, someone who organized a demonstration, an illegal demonstration. All the demonstrations are illegal. So organizing an illegal demonstration in Berlin, for example, someone who sells or buys ammunition, which is, it's something else, but still he didn't do anything with it. He just did that, or someone who killed someone. They're all security prisoners. So it works, I see, because if you say that, the Czech population buys this categorization, then it works. But and also for Israelis, they think, yes, security prisoners, they're all bad. They're all very, very threatening and, and dangerous. But this is not the case, as I just said. So this is the first reason. The second reason that Israel is to blame, it doesn't give the numbers. Even I chair the Israeli Committee for the Palestinian prisoners, and I don't know the numbers. I know the number of prisoners. I know how many years they sit. I know where they sit. I know the difficulties. I know the difficulties of the families in visiting them. I know how Israel breaches the Geneva Agreement. I know to say a lot about the prisoner. I don't know the numbers of those who killed and those who wounded and those who simply threw stones and those because the General Secret Service doesn't give me the number. No one knows. I don't know whether they know, actually, in the Secret Service, because I don't know whether they bothered even to collect the data. I suppose they know, but they don't give us the data, and we don't know, and we cannot fight this. Anyway, it's not, the majority.
Also, in the Czech population, many people think that all Palestinians are terrorists. Could you talk about the current threat?
They don't really think that all Palestinians are terrorists. What do you mean? I don't believe that. I think that all the Palestinians are prisoners.
Next time we'll show you more during your visit, and we might introduce you to more people who really think so. We have had many arguments, even with officials at
all the Palestinians this is the first time I hear this. I mean, that what? I mean, okay, I'll try to reply. It's funny. I mean, there's no population that it is all terrorist. I really don't think that people who think a minute could say something as stupid as this. But if I try to imagine what they think, I suppose they think that there is here a people that is oppressed for 50 years, at least. I mean, we can say more, but at least 50 years. It wants its rights. And since this is threatening, they form a threat. And this is true. This is true. If I go into, this mindset, this is certainly true. You oppress, and what do you expect? People to say thank you. So no, they don't say thank you. And from the prisoner's point of view, I can say that every family has a prisoner. Once in the past, in the present, I'm not talking about the future, but in the past and the present, someone very close, someone secondary. But every family, you enter a Palestinian home, you see on the wall the picture of the prisoner, and it's everywhere. And so you can say that again, if you adopt this mindset, you can they oppose the occupation. Of course, they oppose the occupation. Why wouldn't they? Would those Czechs, who, if they were occupied by another country, and they were, wouldn't they oppose the occupation? At least in their hearts.
Are there currently any so-called terrorist threats that you would, as an Israeli, feel that you would be afraid of living in Tel Aviv?
I don't know. I mean, whether there are plans, why there isn't, what the Secret Service does in order to prevent them, or what is the political situation that doesn't offer them. I really don't know. I know several things. I know that the apartheid wall is no factor. because Palestinians can cross it in order to bring money home. They cross it and they stay illegally in it. And apart from the number of prisoners that I mentioned before, there are at least 1,000 prisoners who are kept in Israel for just, bringing bread to their families. So any terrorist who would like to cross the wall would do this. So this is one thing, the one myth that should be broken while we speak about it. Whether there are imminent threats, I really don't know. But I think it's the wrong way to approach the problem. I mean, what expect now? There are all sorts of threats, car accidents, for example, and we don't, because there are so many car accidents, we don't forbid driving in cars, and we're not doing something totally unreasonable and hysterical. We simply think, we acknowledge the risk on the one hand, and we try to propose problems. And exactly the same should be done with the Palestinians.
So we talked about the perception of Czech people, of Palestinians, and this opinion includes the frequently voiced opinion of the Czech president Miloš Zeman, who says that not all Muslims are terrorists, but all terrorists are Muslims. My question relates to the state terrorism committed by Israel, and also if you could comment on some Jewish organizations, like the Jewish Underground Organization. And another question would be about impunity and extrajudicial executions, if you could comment on that.
Well, that belongs to the past, luckily. I mean, this is something we're over at the moment, I know. But let's treat the first one first. This saying that not all the terrorists are this or that, but I heard it before. It's not only the president. I didn't know that the Czech president said this. It's just playing with definitions, because even before we get to state terrorism, and this is a very, very good question, and even before we get to the Jewish terrorists that here and now and in the past, there are, those very famous terrorists, like the one who just killed, last week, the pilot who just killed 200 people. Was he a terrorist? If he wasn't a terrorist, why? Why don't we take him to be a terrorist? Is it because he wasn't Muslim? Because if he was Muslim, I'm sure it was much easier to classify him as and to think of him as a terrorist. It's just it's a mental state of mind. I'm sure that if he was Muslim, I'm positive of this, that if he was Muslim, then everyone would call him a terrorist. Now he's a lunatic, he's a psycho, which he is. I'm sure he is. But how we classify things is, it's a matter of dogmas and just superstitions and things that we incline to say and we feel more comfortable to say, and that's it. It just fits our worldview, and this is how we classify things. The same goes to people in the States who every so often kill, in high schools and in supermarkets, and, what are they if not terrorists? They're all lunatics, so there are terrorists who are Muslims and lunatics who are all the rest. So this is the result of such a picture. But you asked about state terrorism, and I think this is a very strong question, because again, from the same state of mind, what a state does is never taken as an act of terror if the state belongs to the West. But if the state doesn't belong to the West, then Iran encourages terror. Hamas, of course, it's not even a state, but Hamas, of course, encourages terror. There's, terror here and there and everywhere when it's convenient to call it terror. But if a state like Israel does something like extrajudicial killing, or, just kills 500 children last year, it's fresh, you know. It's even the memory is so fresh, even for people who don't want to remember it, from last year. What is this if not terror? So if we're talking about terror, let's just open the lines and call this terror as well, and then I'll be more inclined to talk about terror. But maybe the term terror is not really fruitful because of this, because it is so easily abused. So I think maybe we should avoid it altogether and talk about the reason for those people to do this, the reason for the Israel state to do this, and then, okay, calmly, without this, the terror label, think whether Israel was justified and I don't know how anyone can justify the killing of 500 children in Gaza. I really don't know what answer could be given to that. Call it terror or not, I really don't mind. Now, you asked about the terror organization, the Jewish terror organization that was years ago. I gave this example because of the treatment it got. There was this group of 29 people. Of 29 people, they were arrested. I think they had a periphery that wasn't even arrested, but 29 people were acknowledged as belonging to this terror group, and they planted bombs in Nablus, in the municipality in Nablus, famously because the mayor lost his leg, and there were killings and there were woundings and all that. So out of these 29 people who were arrested, only 15 were convicted. So half of them went home without, anything, nothing. And 15 were convicted. And of those who were convicted, only 3 were sentenced for life imprisonment. I mean, those who were really... Now, you have to compare this to the case of the Palestinian prisoners, because if there is a group of people and they are caught, and together they committed or they planned to commit something like kidnapping a soldier and killing him, then if 1 or 2 of them did indeed do this, but the other 3 belonged to this group but weren't there on the occasion, they were sentenced for exactly the same sentence, for life imprisonment, and they are there. They keep serving their life sentence till today, even for things that happened 30 years ago. This is the group that I meant. Whereas this group, of same thing, but not under occupation. Only 3 were sentenced for life imprisonment. The rest of the group, 12 people, were sentenced to 7 years or less. And this is not the end of the story, because those who were sentenced for life imprisonment got a parole, and eventually all the members of this group were released after 7 years. So I think the discrepancy is it's simply shocking to me. Every time I say it, and I said it a lot of times, I cannot believe my ears, my own mouth.
Could we finish by you mentioning the statistics, what the Israelis thought about releasing of these people convicted of the crimes of the Jewish?
Yes, at the time, 73% of the Jewish population supported the release of those Jewish terrorists. So yeah, there was a poll. If you believe in polls. But this is what was written, that 73% of the population. There are shocking polls, not only about this, there are shocking polls about Jews agreeing to live in the same house, common house, or same neighborhood or same street with Arabs. I'm not sure how to treat this. I'm quite suspicious of polls, I must say. But yes, these are the numbers.